Lara Trump, so great you could join us again. Really good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
So, Lara, I've got a theory about what's going on right now. We've got this anonymous book come out this week. We've got, of course, the impeachment hearings going on. I think, in a weird way, the anonymous book actually helps make an argument that you and I and others have been making for a long time now, that it's all connected because it's all part of the same thing, which is the establishment trying to reject and undermine and obstruct and block a president that they always hated, who's attacking their policy ideas, who's actually delivering results along those lines, and they can't stand it. And so the book and the impeachment, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, it is all the same thing. Listen, Steve, they've been trying to get Donald Trump out of the White House since he was elected. In fact, 19 minutes after he was inaugurated as our 45th president, the Washington Post wrote an article about impeaching him and how they were going to do it and what should be done to get Donald Trump out of the White House. They knew then that this was a reality. They first tried with the Russia collusion hoax. They thought that $30 million of taxpayer money in 2 years would have swayed the country to somehow think that Donald Trump did something wrong. The only problem is he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't collude with Russia. Our campaign didn't collude with Russia. We finally saw that. They tried to block Brett Kavanaugh from being our next Supreme Court justice, and finally they had to give in and concede that he was indeed qualified to be there. And now we are at Russia 2.0, the Ukrainian hoax, this nonsensical coup against the president that they are, trying to manifest as impeachment, which is so crazy, and everybody knows that it's complete nonsense. And then you have this book, and you're right, Steve, it's all the same thing. They are desperate to do anything they can to try and damage this president in any way. There are no rules when it comes to the Democrats and the left, and anything that they will do, the swamp knows no low. It'll go as low as it has to, because he threatens, the president threatens their way of life. See, for so long, they've been getting by with people turning the other way and not really paying attention to the fact that Congress promises things to people. They go to Washington, D.C., they line their own pockets, they forget about doing anything for the American people. The good news is that despite all of this, the president is still working and delivering results for the American people. It's sort of incredible when you think about all he's had against him.
That's exactly right. Honestly, I think about that the whole time. Just imagine what he could have achieved if these people had a different attitude. And instead of saying, right, we're going to block you and obstruct you at every single thing you try and do, we might just try and work with you. Imagine the results we could have got then. But I just want to pick up on one thing you said there. You used the word coup. And I know a lot of people will hear that and think, oh, that's over the top, that kind of language. Well, hang on a second. The whistleblower's lawyer in this impeachment farce used exactly that word a couple of years back, didn't they? He's saying the coup is on. This is how they've been talking about it. So it's not extreme to use that kind of language.
No, it's not extreme, and I hope everybody in this country is paying attention, because what you're seeing play out right now, we need to always remember in this country, this is not what the United States of America is about. Just because your anointed candidate, Hillary Clinton, did not win in 2016, and the guy who nobody thought had a chance, according to the experts and the mainstream media, it was the one that the people of this country chose to be in the White House, does not give you the authority to try and impeach him. They're moving the goalposts every day, Steve. We see that first it started out as a quid pro quo. Now it's bribery. What are they going to come up with next? I feel like they just go in every day and they pull something out of a hat and they're like, this is what we'll try today. But the American people aren't buying it. In fact, our internal numbers show that since Nancy Pelosi called for this impeachment nonsense, our numbers have gone up substantially for the president. We are doing record fundraising at the Trump campaign in increments of $40 as our average donation. The American people want Donald Trump to stay in the White House, and they are not buying into this hoax.
You're right. And by the way, I think they're going to try everything, and everything. There could be something else after this. Everything except actually trying to win an election the normal way.
Yeah,
that's
they know
the one
they can't.
Thing they don't want to do.
They can't win at the ballot box. So what are you going to do? I mean, which one of these candidates, honestly, do we think is going to be able to beat Donald Trump? That's why you see all the people coming out of left field and trying to jump in the race. They know they can't win with any of these people because it is so good for people in this country right now. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've heard that before. It is working for the people of this country. This country is finally working for Americans under Donald J. Trump as our president. All these other people want to reverse that, and America does not want to see that happen.
So I just want you to reflect on something that you can bring a personal perspective to, which is some of the stuff that we hear when you hear these bureaucrats, either in the impeachment hearings or in this book, talk about their criticisms of the president. A lot of it, for me, comes down to basic snobbery. They go on about how he talks and how he doesn't like to read long briefings. He prefers to ask people questions and so on. To me, that's because he's come up from a different background. He's come up through a business background, and that means you operate in a different way. You don't behave the same way that all these kind of snooty civil servant types operate. And I think that's what's reflected here, which is a basic snobbery about President Trump.
Yeah, well, by the way, when has that worked for America? We've seen presidents in the past who, everyone loves their tone and the way they deliver a message, and I'm sure they wouldn't be caught dead tweeting the sort of things that we see from this president, but he's so transparent. And, Steve, that is the guy that Donald Trump is. It's the guy he's always been. That's why he could go to construction sites all throughout his background as a real estate guy in New York City and get along with the construction workers, and he would stop and talk to the cops on the street. Donald Trump grew up in Queens, so this is how he is, and you know what? It served him very well. He's had great success throughout his career in business, in real estate, on television. So he's done something right, and it's been working for him. So while he might rub some folks that consider themselves elite the wrong way, for the average American, I actually think they find that aspect of Donald Trump quite refreshing.
I totally agree with you. One example I always talk about, because I just think it's such a vivid one, but you hear it all the time when they sneer at him. Oh, look at what he eats. He likes McDonald's. What a terrible person for liking McDonald's. Regular exactly, but that's the snobbery, isn't it? Regular people think that's totally fine. That's how you live your life. What is wrong with that? But these snooty types in Washington, they just can't stand that kind of behavior because it's so alien to everything that they've grown up with. Yeah,
well, and it's also, it kind of reflects on the fact that, again, they never thought that somebody like Donald Trump should ever be in the White House. They think that they have to have a certain pedigree. And it's kind of interesting. All the folks that have preceded Donald Trump as president, they really haven't had any business experience. They haven't had experience, running companies or managing people per se. They have, really not had as qualified a background, I think, as many people would argue, as Donald Trump has. Yet, of course, they're going to get on him for what he eats. For God forbid he wants a McDonald's cheeseburger and fries. You know what? Let the man have it. It's obviously been working for him, and by that, it's been working for the country as well. So he's doing something right, and the cheeseburgers from McDonald's should quite frankly be allowed to stay.
There you go. I very strongly agree with that. On that, we completely agree. Lara, great to see you. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Thank you so much.